Welcome back to the boatyard. So in this episode we are going to tackle the portside garboard, and then we're going to take a little bit of a trip and go down to Mystic Seaport for the Wooden Boat Festival. And if you haven't been to that, you should really try to make it. It's a really great time. So before we launch into the episode, we've got something for y'all. So people have been asking for a while for hats, and we just have not had the time or the energy to do that. And now that we've got Christy helping us out, we threw that task at her. So we have some Acorn to Arabella hats. You might have seen them on Instagram and Facebook. We've been wearing them in a little bit here. But we finally got them up on the website. So if you would like them, that's where to find them. We have this whitish ivory color, and then we have this bluish color. So those are the two options. You can find them on the website. It's another way to contribute if you want to. So without further ado, let's get to the episode and get back to hanging some planks. Previously we scarfed up the garboard plank here for the port side, and when we scarfed it up we had this big, beautiful, perfect plank, and there was one knot near the edge that wasn't really great. And we were kind of hoping that when we lined the plank off that we'd be able to avoid it, and we weren't. So this is the piece that I ended up cutting out last night from the port side plank here. And as you can see, we've got a knot that kind of comes through and some checking. So we really didn't want that on the garboard plank, or any plank really. And it would be kind of a shame to jettison or cut this giant board down just for this little defect. So instead what we did is put in a graving piece here. So I went to the off-cut pile from when we cut out these planks and took a piece from the same board and made a piece that would fit. So I measured up as far as I needed to get above the knot, and then just made tapered wings out. The longer and lower angle those are, the more glue surface you have and the stronger it is within reason. And then I fitted this piece, glued it in last night, and today we'll finish fairing it out and we'll be good to go. And it's nice that this graving piece is big enough that we can get a couple screws into it as well. So it won't just be the glue holding it, although the resource null I'm sure is more than up to the task. But having it big enough that we can get a couple screw fastenings into the back rabbet certainly won't hurt. Today's mission is to fit the port side garboard. So the first step in that is pulling a whole bunch of measurements off of the hull and transferring them to this plank so that we can get them backed out and have it fit properly. And essentially what we need to figure out is how tall the back rabbet is on the plank, because it varies down the whole length of the boat. And the back rabbet is straight. And then we need to figure out how much of a curve we need to back out where the frames start to curve. And that's all going to be different for every frame down the boat. So essentially we go through and we pull all these measurements from the frames and from the rabbet and the back rabbet. We transfer it onto the plank. We connect all of the dots with a batten, and it'll show us what timber we need to remove. So that hopefully when this plank goes up against the hull, it'll fit nice and tightly. We started in the stern here. We measured down the length of the boat and marked where every frame was, and then we transferred that to the plank and squared down from the top edge of the plank, because that's an actual straight line down the length of the plank. And then that gives us the frame locations on the plank, and now once we pull the rest of the measurements we can transfer them over and know where onto that plank we're transferring them. Once we got all of the frame locations marked out on the plank, we can come over and pull the rest of the measurements and transfer them onto the plank. So the measurements we're looking for are the height of the back rabbet here, because when the plank goes on, the back rabbet is going to be straight. So we don't want to back out any place that's going to be against the back rabbet. We want to leave that nice and straight and full width. And then we're going to measure how much backing out we need to do here. And we're going to do that with a fid. We're going to put the fid up against here, And then we're going to measure how far the fid overhangs the frame here. And we're just going to take the Sharpie and mark those measurements right onto the back rabbet and onto the frame. We'll do that down the whole length of the boat. And since this is all going to get painted and covered with a plank, nobody will ever see all these Sharpie marks, which is great. If you look at the plank, it's 9.5 inches through most of the stern, and then as it comes into the stem, it deepens all the way to 12 and then narrows a bit again. So now that we're past the 9.5 inch, we're going to switch to taller fid, and Alex went through and marked it for the inches. So I can look back behind me and know that here at the 14-foot 1-inch frame, we're 10 inches deep. So I can measure that off of the fid, because if we use the 9-inch all the way down, we're not going to get an accurate measurement. We marked the heights of the back rabbet onto the plank here and sprung a batten. And as you can see, it looks kind of like what you would expect out of a drunk snake. And everything that we've done so far in the boat building, a batten like this would be horrible and would totally freak us out and would be something that you do not want to see. And when we sprung this batten, when we did the starboard side, that was it kind of freaked us out. And we sprung the edge where we need to back out. We even left it sprung, went and took lunch, came back, looked at it some more, and we're like, it just doesn't look right. And we rechecked the measurements, and all the measurements that we did checked out. So finally, we ponied up, and we backed it out almost to that line, and lo and behold, it's actually what it needed to be. And we just needed to trust the measurements. And if you think about it, the rabbet in the back is taller, and then as the frames start to bend out at midship, the back rabbet becomes narrower, and then it gets taller up in the stem. And that's exactly what this drunk snake of a batten does. So this is one of those instances where the batten never lies, and you just need to trust it, even though it looks funky. So we're gonna get this marked out, and then we'll spring it on the edge for what we need to back out, and then we'll just be able to connect the dots and see if it fits. We've marked out the plank here, and we have our two axes marked. So there's the top where we need to back out, and there's the face marking where the height of our back rabbet is. And now we need to go through and essentially connect those two dots in a nice smooth arc all the way down the boat so it'll sit fair against the frames. Well, one of the things we're going to do is go through with the hand saws, and we're just going to make some shallow kerfs every 6-8 inches or so, and we're going to come very close to connecting the dots. And that way, when we come through with the power planer, I don't have to constantly be looking on the side trying to see this line. I can just look down, and if I can see saw kerf, I know I need to keep planing more, and that'll be a reference guide. We're also not going to plane all the way to the lines, and the reason is these lines are marked if the plank is sitting right on the back rabbet. And what's going to happen is we're going to put the plank on, and we're going to do a little bit of trimming and shaving to the bottom so that it sits down and is flush against the bottom of the rabbet really well. And if we take anything off the bottom of the plank, the whole plank's going to drop, which means we're not going to have to back out as much as we have here. But we need to back out so that we can put it on and do the test fit and see how we need to shape the bottom, because we're never going to get an accurate measurement if it's not backed out. So we're going to do like 75–80% of the backing out. We'll put it on, it'll give us an idea for the bottom, we'll make some measurements for that, we'll put it back on, do a little more backing out, And this is one of those things we want to sneak up on, because if we cut right to these lines and then end up shaving 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch off the bottom to match the rabbit, then these lines are no longer going to be right, and we're going to kind of screw ourselves. So this is going to be a bunch of on and off and just kind of sneaking up on it. And then we can put a pipe clamp down and start edge setting the stern in. And we can just kind of slowly start working forward. Not as bad as I thought it would be. A little bowed, but I'm putting it out alright. So let's get that big C-clamp on the end and kind of loosen up as much as we can and still have it kind of be stable. And we'll have to see if we can work it back a little bit.
Keep going. A little bit more. And we're ready to skew there. Just needs to go down now.
Sweet. That worked. The port side garboard here is a direct copy of the starboard side garboard, and we knew that it wouldn't fit exactly because there are chances of us getting both sides of the boat to within a 32nd of an inch of each other with all the shaping and fairing and everything for the rabbit is pretty unlikely, but by copying it, it should get us within spitting distance, which it did. So we clamped the plank in here, and our biggest gap is about 5/8 down the run between the rabbit and the plank. So we went through and we marked the whole bottom of the plank 5/8 inches up from the rabbit, so we can spring a bat into that, cut it, and then that should pretty much perfectly match the rabbit. And now the only issue with that is if we bring the bottom of this up, it means that the whole plank's going to move forward because of this angle. So if we were to bring this up, it's going to slide forward and it's going to mess all of that up. So we need to make sure that we drop the plank and trim off that aft end a little bit. Otherwise, it's going to push us forward, and all of this careful measuring we did is going to be for nothing. So I think we got everything marked out and figured out. So now we got to pop it off of the boat, set it on some sawhorses, spring a bat in, strike a line, cut it to that, wrestle it back on here, and see how much closer we are. The other thing is, by dropping it this much, it means the backing out on the back is going to change. So it's not quite sitting flat on the frames, but I think if we drop it that 5/8 inch, we're going to be really close. So it's a good thing that we didn't back out all the way to that line earlier.
Alright, let's finish this plank.
We just ran the saw down the garboard plank here and nipped off that little bit, so hopefully it should fit nice and tight to the rabbet now. Although it's starting to get late in the day and we're getting a bit tired. So I think we're going to throw this on one more time today, see how it kind of fits, and then we'll know what we're in for tomorrow. And tomorrow we can do the final fit and the paint. And then we're headed down to the wooden boat show down in Mystic. So we'll see if we get it on before Mystic, but I think it might be totally ready to get on before Mystic, and we'll have to hang it when we get back. But we'll see how it goes. Yesterday was cool and rainy. Today is hot and muggy. Weather just can't make up its mind. So yesterday we got the garboard to fit much closer here on the port side. We trimmed a little bit off, and the mission this morning is going to be to pull it down and into that back rabbet as tight as we possibly can and see if we need to do any more trimming and get those measurements. If it isn't tight into the back rabbet and it isn't taking all of the twists it's going to take, it's kind of hard to figure out exactly where it's going to meet up with the rabbet and what shaping you got to do. Because as we take the straight plank and we bend it around that hull, kind of the nose of it's going to want to start to dive a little bit. So some places where it might be up a little bit and you actually push it in and put the twist in it, the plank starts to drop down a little bit and will fill it. So we got to really make sure that this is cinched down really well and where it needs to be. We can pull the final measurements, hopefully do one more round of backing out and trimming a little bit, and put this thing on for another test fit this afternoon. And hopefully by the end of today it'll fit really well, and then we can paint it and oil it and hang it for real when we get back from the boat show. It's hard work holding that camera, huh? Just...
Zoom down?
Yeah, come down. A little bit of a gap, but I want to see what happens when we start.
Yeah, we can always come back down.
Stem end, this will probably drop down a little bit more. All right, one last thing after the last thing, because there's always another last thing after the last thing. We want to make sure that we give these fresh planks a nice coat of raw linseed oil before we go to the boat show. It's supposed to be really hot this weekend and nobody's going to be around to check on them. And the last thing we want is these planks drying out and checking or cracking or doing anything funky that we don't want. So we'll give them one last coat of oil. Randy's on the other side right now painting up the port side garboard. And that'll be it for the day. And tomorrow we'll head down to Mystic.
So we just got back from a whirlwind weekend down at the Wooden Boat Show at Mystic Seaport, which is fantastic. We love going there every year. It's a great show, and it's a great opportunity for us to get around some more wooden boats and see a bunch of our friends and hang out and make connections. So we actually spent the whole weekend just wandering around the show this year. We didn't have a booth. We kind of wanted to help out a bunch of the friends that we know. And it was great. We got stopped by a ton of people. We met a ton of our fans. The other thing is do you remember Andrew that we mentioned earlier, who is restoring Rosalind? Andrew gave a talk, which was fantastic. He did a phenomenal job, and it was great to see his progress. We also went to see Danielle Doggett's talk, and she is heading up a project called Sail Cargo, which you all should check out. It is very worth checking out. They are building a 100-plus sailing ship to do sail cargo with down in Costa Rica. So that's Sail Cargo. We actually might possibly be making a trip down there, so stay tuned for that. But now, we're back here, we're back in the boatyard. We uncovered the Garboard for the port side here. She is all painted and all oiled, so it is time for us to bed the rabbit and put this puppy in place.
So hey Tim.
Go ahead, let go a little bit.
Need a hand? Hold on a second. No, just give us a second. We ready? Okay. I think we got it. Yeah, we're in there. Cool. Whew. How's it going?
Good. How are you guys?
Hi. Good. In the middle of wrestling on the Garboard.
Alright, it is the heat of the day here. We've been working all day and it is around 90-something degrees. Yes, there are hotter places in the US. You guys don't need to let us know this in the comments. But for us, this is making the work a little bit more challenging. It's a little bit humid. We also had this plank sitting around well covered and well oiled while we were at Mystic, but it still seems to have maybe changed a little bit of shape. So we're going to do the same thing we did on the other side for the other Garboard and let her sit overnight. And hopefully she'll settle in a little bit. We'll give her a couple cranks tonight. We'll give her a couple cranks later tomorrow. And then we'll see about fastening her. So we are almost done with both Garboards.
We got Arabella's port side Garboard on, so now she has 2 planks, which is awesome. It took us a little while to get the Garboard plank on, just like it did on the starboard side. So we employed some car jacks and some ratchet straps and just about every clamp in the house. And we got it snuck down really well, nice and tight. And just like we did on the starboard side, we let it sit overnight. And the reason we did that is because we didn't do any steaming or anything, so we're bending the oak into place. And we wanted to give it the evening and the night to just kind of relax a little bit before we put the fasteners in. And the other reason is that we put dolphinite in the back rabbet, and it creates such a huge surface area down the whole length of the plank that we wanted to give the dolphinite some time to be able to move and flow and fill in any low spots and get pressed out of any of the higher spots. So by letting it clamped overnight, we allowed that dolphinite the time to do that. So we got everything clamped, we took a bunch of time and made sure we got it exactly the way we wanted it, and then left it, came out that night, gave it another little crank, woke up in the morning, gave it another little crank, and then came out and fastened everything. And when we gave it that last little twist, we watched more dolphinite come up out of the back rabbet, and the fit was really good. So the next step is going to be to tackle the broadstrakes, and they're going to be a lot narrower since they're right here at the turn of the bilge, and we don't want to do a ton of backing out. So those planks should hang a lot easier than the garboards. The garboards really should have been the hardest planks for the boat. Fingers crossed that that holds true, but from talking to everyone with experience about this, the garboards should be the biggest fight. So it's good to be through that. So that wraps this up. Thank you very much for watching. We really appreciate all the views, all the support that we've been getting. Thank you very much to everyone who got a t-shirt from the last t-shirt campaign. We just about covered the price of the diesel, which is fantastic. So again, thank you so much for watching, for following, for the continued support, and we'll see you next time when we keep heading up towards the shear with the planks.
That's perfect. I cut that. Okay.